Mama, is God real?
Is marriage for life?
Do we have to be baptized?
Is drinking really wrong?
Well, that's your interpretation.
Where do I come from?
Do we really have to have authority for what we do?
Where is God when I need Him?
Rise up, O men of God. His kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and in the night of wrong.
Hello, friends, and welcome again to the Shield of Faith. My name is Wes Garland, and I preach for the Northwest Church of Christ in Clay County, Tennessee, and we also have along with us, as always, Scott Gann.
Hey, Wes.
He is the preacher of the Philippi Church of Christ in Tompkinsville, Kentucky. We also have with us, as always, Eric Pitcock.
Hey, Wes.
He is the preacher of the Gamaliel Church of Christ in Gamaliel, Kentucky. But friends, we hope and pray that for the next 30 minutes, you'll take out your Bible, paper, and pen, and we'll study with us on the subject which is at hand, because today we're talking about the subject of restoring the home. Whenever you look out here in this nation, guys, you see so many different homes of homes where they just don't love one another. Right. They don't respect one another. You have divorced homes. I mean, it's all rapid.
Yes, sir.
And there's not even any discipline being done.
That's right. That's right. You know, I work in the school systems, and I see this on a daily basis on the elementary level, that kids come to school and they're crushed because of something or bad consequences that they have to come from a home that is in the situation that we'll be dealing with today. I mean, you know, you take a small child, you know, that child deserves a home that God would want it to have. You know, and it can't do anything. It's an innocent child. That's right. But because of some choices, or because that we've gotten so far away from the pattern of what the home actually should be, you know, we see devastated children in the school system. And it don't stop there.
And you know, we understand the children are innocent, you know, innocent bystanders in this. And I know that there are probably people listening to us today that their homes are broken. Their homes are in shambles. And there are mothers and there are fathers that they don't know what to do. And maybe they've exhausted everything they know to do. What we want to do is we want to bring some type of encouragement to individuals that find themselves in situations that are less than what they want them to be. And hopefully by the things that we can implement and by the things that we can discuss here would help to better our homes. And
heal the fractured homes that's out there today, because that's what we ought to be doing. We ought to be trying to heal the homes the best that we can.
That's right. And we really need to get our audience to really understand this. God loves you.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
He wants you to have the best life possible in this life. And the only way in which you can ever have the happy life of a family that you can ever have is to go by His standard.
That's right.
If you want to have your children to have the best lives they could ever have, you got to go by the standard.
Yes, sir.
And I mean, we've done programs on what that standard has to be.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And so you can go
it's
to our program.
It's got to be a God-centered home. You know, you got to, you know, we could read about it in the book of Genesis and understand really quickly what a God-centered home is. God instituted it. You know, God was with them in the garden. You know, and God basically walked them down their matrimony. You know, He gave Eve to Adam.
That's it.
And all these things, you know, if you have to have several things in place. You know, you need to have God as the head of your home.
That's right.
You know, you've got to, as a husband or a home, the leader of the home, the husband should be the leader of the home. You know, when he decides to get married, he needs to be able to provide for his wife, because you have to leave and cleave.
You know, these are principles out here that don't even have the man to do that.
Right. These are principles that we can understand from the very first book in the Bible, the book of Genesis, in the creative things. And so these are some things that we, if we put in our lives, that we could have the type of homes that God would want us to have.
For individuals that have found themselves, that are listening, that they find themselves in a situation where they have a home, they have a family, they're either married or they're unmarried, they have children, they're out of wedlock, or whatever the state that you find yourself in. There are some key principles, I think, that could help us in helping to mend what relationships we have. you know, if
Doesn't matter if it's already been broken.
right.
God has the power to bring it back.
That's right.
Yes.
And, you know, it takes effort upon both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we want to encourage people to be the individual that has the courage to
Right.
take the initiative to start
That's it.
this process.
Right.
That's
It's
it.
not
You
an
know,
easy process.
It's not an easy process.
And it's not an easy situation to deal with. And
Yeah.
sometimes we want to shirk from our responsibilities
Yeah.
in this, but we're looking for people that's got enough courage
Yeah. That's right.
that can step up out of this and look at some of the principles that we'll be presenting
That's
today
right.
that'll help those fractured homes.
You might have heard, you know, dealing with the audience here, you might have heard the news talk about, well, marriage takes a 50-50, you know, participation. That ain't right.
Well, no, I don't
Marriage
think so.
takes a 100% on each part,
Yes.
even on the children, 100%.
You know, I heard a wise gospel preacher once say that the marriage has to be 100%.
Exactly.
He said sometimes, though, the husband might have to give 75% because at that
Yes,
point
pick
in
up the
time,
slack.
the wife can only give 25.
That's
That's
right.
all she can do
Yes.
at that time.
That's right.
And then when sometimes the husband can only give 25% because that's all he's capable of doing at that time. So the wife has to do the other 75%.
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
100% marriage all the time,
And-
understanding it balances out. But the problem is, do they care and love each other enough to balance out those
And I think,
percentages?
I think that's key.
And I think that's the
key thing.
starting point.
I think that's the starting point
Yes.
is whether or not somebody has the love that they need to have for God and for their spouse. I mean,
Exactly.
We'll begin with the love of God.
Right.
You know, a man and woman need to love God.
Right.
And that love for God will cause them to want their marriage to work. That love for God would want them to have the family that God would want them to have.
The man's
and base
actions.
it upon principles that God has set forth in the pages of the Bible. And so
A man's actions are never going to are only going to reflect his relationship with God.
that's right.
Right, that's
Yes,
right.
sir.
So,
Yeah, and so we think about love. You know, 1 Corinthians 13, it says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men, angels, but have not love, I become the sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so I could remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing." And on we could go with this chapter in 1 Corinthians 13.
It
And-
it actually describes what love is,
Yes, sir.
what love will allow, the
Uh-huh.
actions of love.
That's right.
And it also gives those negative actions of love that is not considered love.
but I think what
it's
he's
a great
really
chapter.
what he's really trying to give a focus on there in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it doesn't matter what you do in this life. If you don't have the love,
If it's not
It's
motivated
nothing.
by love,
That's
it's
right.
the love for God first.
Exactly.
And then when you're in a right relationship with God, loving Him supremely, all this other stuff will fall into place.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
that's the fact. That's where all every pure and perfect gift comes down from.
You go through this text and it says that love is, in verse number 4, it says love suffers long.
Right.
You know, love has the capability of enduring and withstanding a lot.
That's what we talked about, the 25,
That's right.
75.
That's right.
You know,
Love in the relationship between a man and a woman has the capability when there are times when that person is either weak or has an event happen to them in their life that they cannot contribute as much as perhaps they would want or desire. Love would enable us to be able to suffer through that. Love helps us to make it through those difficult times.
Right.
Those maybe the first year of marriage, you know, you're getting to know one another. It's you know, it becomes maybe difficult, and you struggle, and conflicts arise, and you're trying to work out, you know, how you're going to work your conflicts out and your problems, and you got money issues that come up, and you've got you know, you've got in-laws and issues with the in-laws and issues with the, you know, we might want to call them the outlaws in some cases. But, you know, we see that all these issues come up, jobs, children, schools, and all these issues come up. And love is going to help enable us to be able to suffer through that and to be able to endure all that. And then he says, it's kind. Love is kind. It does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. And I think that is a key point. It doesn't seek its own. It's not something.
It's not selfish.
That's right.
That's the problem, I think, with a lot of
Yes,
marriages today. Don't y'all think? The
I do.
selfishness
That's
of
right.
the spouses.
It's
We
not
want to know.
about you, and it's not about me. It's about us together as a unit. As a
Well, that goes back to that divine principle
That's right.
in the beginning.
Leave and cleave.
Leave and cleave.
Yes, sir.
You've got to leave your mother and father. Leave, like you would say, some would say the outlaws, and cleave.
And become
to them,
one flesh.
And become one flesh.
That's right.
Now,
That's right. And you
we have
operate.
those analogies that a man don't want to hurt his
That's
own
right.
self, you know, and that's the way we ought to treat. And we'll maybe have time to get to that in Ephesians.
So basically, summing this up, a person has to have a love for God as the foundation for everything in life.
And they love one another.
Especially the home.
And that love
That's
for
right.
God causes them to love one another.
That's right.
Causes their love to be the right kind of love, which is what First Corinthians
Expressed correctly.
That's
yes.
right.
You
But
express that love.
what's really interesting, though, is that we should not only have the love of God within us, but express that type of love down to our children, like in Deuteronomy chapter 6 talks about there. In chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, it says, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart." So now you're applying it to yourself. He says, "And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit down, sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, when you rise up." You need to be not only keeping it for yourself, but expressing it in such a way as to pass it on down.
That's right.
Right.
Your love for God trickles down.
It is.
And binds throughout the family unit.
Right.
That's it.
And
that's what binds it. That's what binds it together.
right.
You know, it's amazing. So many analogies we can make about the family and different aspects of it. You know, that's why the wedding bands that you would wear on your finger is circular. It's together, and it unites. And so there's so many different analogies we could look at to show the importance of this, but it's got to be God-centered.
Yeah.
And like Eric says, you know, it trickles down,
This
it flows out. The love of God flows from us to our family.
You know, one thing that I see with individuals is lack of communication.
Yes,
That is one thing that is failing in
That's one of the
in
number
marriages
one
and everything,
causes
yes.
That's right.
for family problems.
I mean, you take the money issues that arise in homes and the conflicts that arises out of just something like money and the pursuit of money and all the problems and turmoil that can bring and erode the family. But you know, we then see communication as something that's being just a big problem.
Right.
You know, we are a unit as a mother and father, as a wife and her husband. They're a unit. They need to make decisions together.
Right.
We understand that the husband is the head of the home, but at the same time, he's to love his wife. He is to love her as Christ loves the church, according to Ephesians 5. And taking that into consideration, a person would not want to make a decision that is going to not only impact his life, but impact the life of his wife.
Right.
Without taking into consideration her thoughts, her feelings, you know, what her desires are, and taking that into consideration.
We understand this in the physical realm because, I mean, just think about the business world. The business world cannot run successfully without communication.
That's right.
Right.
The military, communication is the valid thing. I mean,
sir.
to bring about, like they've got their plans, their objectives, to reach those objectives, only way you can ever do that for a team and I mean, you got 4 branches of the military here. They've got to have communication within themselves.
If you have a conflict and you do not communicate that conflict out, it's going to give you problems.
It's going to give you a lot of problems.
It's going to continue, it's going to build, it's going to fester, and it's going to continue. It's going to be brought back up. You need to, when issues come up in the home, it needs to be dealt with at that moment, at that time.
Right.
It needs to be communicated, and your thoughts and your feelings need to be expressed. Her thoughts and her feelings need to be expressed. There needs to be an understanding of what is going on and how you feel about it. And you know, when we leave things undone and we leave things unsaid, I think that leads to resentment. I think that leads to having harsh feelings, and I think that leads to on down the road creating more problems.
Right. Well, we can't get across without understanding this principle that we were going to bring up, because you can't. Communication. You must have communication, as we look at in the Scriptures in Genesis chapter 2 and verses 24, and also in Matthew chapter 19 in verses 5. Now, he says that you shall be one flesh. If you're one flesh, you're going to have some communication there.
Yeah.
You know, that's a principle that really perfectly packages all these ideas that we're going to be looking at. You know, you're supposed to love and respect yourself. You're supposed to love, you're supposed to communicate, you have to be able to understand what you're doing.
That's right.
So your spouse has to.
That's right.
You know, all these things that we're going to be looking at. And you know what? All these problems that we've talked about, finances, you know, problems with your marriage, whether it be recreation that you're involved in, work that you're involved in, even if you're involved in something that's outside the marital realm, if you're running around, you know, communication is the key to solve all these problems. You know, they wouldn't be money problems if the husband and wife sat down and worked on it together. They wouldn't be a work problem, somebody working too much, if the husband came in or the wife came in, whichever one it may be, and said, look, we need to communicate about this. So the communication is the key to all these problems. And when you go look at that one flesh principle, you understand that solves it.
That's right. I mean, a home cannot
function. It's core
function.
principles, really, that we need to function from.
A home cannot function at all without talking to one another.
Right.
Now, sometimes,
just on anything. I mean, just
not everything you have to communicate on.
I mean, just think about this. What about talking about spiritual things? You need to be one in that.
Right.
You need daily life things. The unspiritual things, right? Just the daily life things. Just talk about things. Discipline for the children. This is the big one. I mean, I've seen in so many homes are broken up because, I mean, the child suffers from it because they've got one parent saying, okay, this is the way I'm going to discipline him. You got another one that's totally opposite of that. There's no function in there.
You know, even the discipline process goes back to communication.
Right.
You know, how is it that we're going to deal with this situation? And what you're asking for is you let a little child. They're smarter than you think they are.
You better believe it.
And you better believe it.
I've seen this time and time again.
Yes, you better believe they will drive a wedge right between mom and daddy if they can.
And it don't take them long to see that partiality or whatever it is.
That's right. It don't take them long to pick out that mama or daddy, which one is weak.
Well, we see that almost in every home, don't we?
That's right.
I've experienced it with my very own self. My children has experienced. My parents have experienced it. It's just something we do. We know there's certain things we can do around mama that we can't do around daddy, or vice versa.
That's right.
You know, we know who. You know, we know who to run to when we're in trouble. You know, so. But hopefully, what we can do is we can repair that and bring one another in. And then somebody is not more, you know, what we need to do is come together on this thing. Be this, you know, I have the mindset of this one flesh deal. You know, we need to be in one mind with one accord, doing all things unified in the home. You know, there's so many core principles in the Bible that teaches us that we need to be single-minded about things. And a lot of time we don't communicate it enough to know what the other's thinking. And so I've seen that a lot in everybody's life. They do that. But when you've got a home that, as far as this discipline process goes, that are contrary to one another, you're going to have problems. And you need to be communicating about it.
Amos 3 in verse 3 brings out this very, very plainly.
Yes, sir.
He says, can two walk together unless they are agreed?
You know, we have
you cannot walk together. I cannot be paired with you walking down the same road unless you are agreeing and I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. That's why it's so that's why it's so difficult for people who are in homes where the mother or father is a Christian and their spouse is not. And you know, one thing I want to bring out is that it's easy for us to say you need to communicate, and you need to do this and you need to do that, and then it's easy for us to say that, but then I don't want to leave somebody with the impression as to, well, how can I do that? You know, here there may be somebody that's listening. They're in a situation where they're in a home where their spouse is not a Christian.
Right.
And what am I going to do in that situation? You know, how can I begin a process of creating a relationship that's closer than what it is? And, you know, I'm not an expert, but I could make some suggestions as to, you know, have conversation with them and, you know, ask them what they think about things.
Right.
You know, maybe the problem is not whether or not you're ever saying anything, but maybe the problem is that you're not allowing them to say something.
Right.
Maybe you're not taking into consideration what they think and what they feel. So maybe you could ask them, what do you think about this?
Right.
And or maybe you could
not only to the spouse, but even to the children.
Yeah. How
Get
about
their feelings on it.
How about you know, how about complimenting one another?
Right.
How about in giving someone an encouragement? You know, so many homes, that's an odd thing.
Right.
If the mother was to come home and compliment Daddy on something he done, he would be like, "What? What's going on here? You know, what you been doing?
Right.
You know, what you been drinking something? You know, what's wrong?
Right.
Or vice versa.
Right.
We
Or
all
the
you know,
kids.
It's easy. It's easy for the mother and the father. It's easy for them to create a negative atmosphere. It's
we
easy.
live in a critical
That's right.
society.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, we're always
surrounded by it.
We're surrounded by negativity. You know,
It's easy for us.
and we
to,
fall in those traps.
We need to think about how we speak to one another. You know, you would not speak to a stranger in some of the ways that many times we speak to our spouses. And, you know, we bite and snap and devour at one another, and somebody then comes up and talks to us, and we just begin to smile, and we just begin to, you know, just like nothing ever happened, and just we're the nicest person ever was, and then they leave, and then here we are, we're back devouring and biting and snapping at one another.
That's right.
You know, the same principle that you brought forth, this is not going to work, because Jesus said, you know, there in Matthew 12 and 22, he says, a house divided against itself won't stand. And see, that's the principle we're trying to bring about. We want to try to fix the house that's divided against itself. And these are some ways. But when you think about all the principles we've looked at so far, we see, you know, if we would concentrate on 1 Corinthians 13 and look at those aspects of what love is. It suffers long, it's kind, it rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. All those things that it does. It's kind, it's compassionate, you know, it don't look for bad things in people, you know, and I think that's a problem. I think we kind of, you know, we're not content in the homes, and what we need to do is try to work on these things, try to be more content, and try to look at the good things in life. There's a lot of material out there to help people in fractured homes. Especially, this is the best material that you can ever have on the home, because it's been divinely instituted by God.
That's right.
And you can't get no better source for the home than this book.
You know, I remember a year or two ago, there was a lady, young lady, that this was her wedding day. And I happened to be at, this was a place that I worked, and she had come by there to visit with somebody else that worked there, and this was her wedding day. And I recall as these two people were sitting and talking, they was asking about certain situations that had occurred, and apparently sometime in the relationship that this young lady had with this other individual, they had some rocky times in the past, and so that this other person was questioning them about that. And the response of this young lady on her wedding day was, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just get a divorce and we'll go on and get somebody else. And I thought that to myself, that how sad that it is.
Right.
That here is a lady, here is a young woman that's young, that is beginning to involve herself in a divine institution and a divine, something that God established, that is the home. And she goes into this relationship with a mindset that she's not committed to it to begin with.
Right.
Commitment is a big
thing. She is, that's right. She started her marriage with the idea that she doesn't That's right, with doubt.
The seed of doubt was planted in her mind, and so she had a backup plan before the plan ever got started. See, that's really what. And I think sometimes if the mentality of younger people today is that mentality. It's sad to say.
That's right.
If it don't work, we can always get out of it.
That's the reason, is because that's what Hollywood is producing.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
the negativity.
About it.
Yes.
Hey, you know, let's just
Well,
no commitments.
That's just what society as a
That's
whole
all
has.
society is all talking about.
But
a lot
we
of
have
that as well is failure in the home, and the parents not teaching their children what's going on.
They haven't seen that in the home.
Exactly.
What they have grew up seeing in the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years is they have grew up seeing homes of, you know, even going back to Granny and Grandpa, of that was divided, that was divorce occurred, that people just dissolved their marriages without even thinking about it. And then Mom and Daddy comes along and they do the same thing. And then you know they just have seen this process time and time and time again.
It's a vicious cycle.
And it's a cycle.
It's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle. So what we're trying to do with this program today is trying to break that cycle.
If there was
and implant, you know, and put some things in place. You know, I think time. We don't spend enough time with our spouses and with our children.
That's right.
As a whole,
Getting personal
to be able to get personal. What happened to the dinner table?
Yes, sir.
You know, how many times, I mean, I'm as guilty of it probably as a lot of people because we're in this rush society. But what happened to the dinner table where we sat down all together as a family and talked about the day, talked about how our days was, how our day is with our spouse, with our husband and all that. You know, that is a precious moment that we need to take advantage of.
We need to implement some time during the day, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's not at, you know, whether it's some other time before bedtime, wherever. We need to take some type of time and initiative to be with our families, and I need to do this. And I'm guilty of neglecting this situation and not being with my family from time to time like I should.
See, it's so very
easy. That's right.
In the society that we live in today, to be so much into our work, so much into doing secular activities, doing those other things that we forget the thing that we need to be putting first, and that's love for God, but secondly, our families.
That's right.
Right.
Marriage and the homes are not for quitters.
Exactly.
That's right. That's
exactly.
We need to be committed. That's right. We need to be committed to one another.
And so,
and you know, we understand nobody likes a quitter, you know, and we don't want these homes to quit. We want them to keep on, and we want them to heal the fractures that's in them, and take some of these steps that we've looked at to try to do that.
Friends, I hope and pray that you have taken notes and you have seen that we're not doing this to be critical. We're doing this because we love you.
We all fall short.
And we all fall short in this. We're not perfect. But these are some things in which the Bible says that we need to do, then it will help us in the home. And I mean, just think about it. If you have your love for God correct, your actions are going to reflect it. And if you want everything else to be right, get your spiritual life right first. And it all reflects back to it. Communicate with one another. Communicate with your spouse. Communicate with your children. We're lacking in this. We need to be asking them, you know, just some things about, what about spiritual things? What about their lives? What's going on in school? What about their future? What are their needs? What's their dreams? I mean, as a parent, do you know these things about your child? We need to get personal with them. Be a father to them. Be a mother to them. And also, we need commitment. I hope and pray that you have learned something and you'll take this and apply these things. If we can be of any help, please just let us know. But until next time, may God bless.